Hey everyone, James Lynch here doing a quick reaction video to the news that Ariel Helwani has announced his next career move, and it's going to be with Yahoo Sports, something I talked about the other day. There were some rumblings from Front Office Sports that he's going to be joining Yahoo, but what I didn't know and they didn't mention here is that this is actually a partnership. So Ariel Helwani is essentially creating a new combat sports hub in partnership with Yahoo Sports. This is really interesting. I'm curious to see how this all plays out. It's called the uncrowned.com. So I'm just going to read this and I'll read what Yahoo has to say as well, and then I'll give you my thoughts on this after. Extremely excited to announce that I'm partnering with Yahoo Sports to launch a new brand in a new combat sports vertical, MMA, boxing, pro wrestling, uncrowned.com. It'll be called the Ariel Helwani Shows, expanding, more days, more content, same time, same format, new New York City studio. Interesting. So they're going to be doing a studio, so it's going to be basically like the MMA Hour, like what we've seen, just with a different studio. Here's the deal. I'm coming back to my YouTube channel, my pod feeds. I will own all my content. Everything will premiere live on my channels. This is huge. Owning the, as you know, I'm sure you've seen this happen with Barstool when this whole thing happened with Call Her Daddy, like owning the likeness. This is a huge thing, that he owns all the content. That's a big deal. So, you know, everything, when this is all said and done, Ariel will own everything, meaning like if he ever decides to leave this, he's still going to get paid ad revenue or whatever from the content that he owns. So good on him for there. I'm the executive producer of the show and executive editor of the new site. We will also be launching a new boxing and wrestling shows in the coming months too. And I'm bringing my boys with me, all of them. So that'll be obviously New York Rick, Connor, and Frank. New era, new chapter. I can't wait. He does a video here. You can find it here on his Twitter feed. Good for him. Again, this is something that is new in the combat sports space. You know, it's one thing to be a freelancer working for different companies. It's another thing to be your own brand and partner with a major company like Yahoo Sports. I saw a lot of people the other day in the comments being like, this is a downgrade. Yahoo Sports sucks. Is this whatever? Like, you guys aren't paying attention. Yahoo Sports is one of the biggest sports entities that's been around forever. They're still doing regular shows. It's still a major sports media outlet. So people saying that, you're just not paying attention. And I'm really curious to see how this new outlet goes. It's already a pretty crowded space in MMA if you think of all the different outlets, but having Ariel there, him bringing his crew along with him, PT Caro as well will be joining them too. That's a very much a big deal and very interesting, because if you remember a year ago, and I mentioned this in the other video, Kevin Iole, who had been at Yahoo Sports for, you know, a very, very, very long time, I think like 2 or 3 decades, was let go, and now they brought in Benton Folks, and now Ariel's here, and it sounds like, you know, a totally new endeavor here as well. I am curious to see what the relationship is going to be like with the UFC, because again, as we've known in the past, Dana White and Ariel not really getting along too well, so we'll see how that all works out. But one thing I did want to clear up in this video, and I don't think I mentioned last video, there's a lot of people saying that Ariel cannot cover UFC events. It hasn't been like that for a while. That's actually not true. That's been kind of a bad rumor there. So really curious to see how this all goes. Again, you know, the industry's changing very rapidly. I'll just mention here what Yahoo has said as well. Major partnership announcement, including Uncrowned, same thing there. Ultimate destination for MMA. It's going to be debuting September 13th in Las Vegas at the Sphere. So they're going to be doing a live show along with the Canelo Alvarez bout as well. The Ariel Helwani Show. Sorry, some coughing here. Flagship program. New York Rick, Connor Burks, and PT Carroll. The one thing we got to think about too is if they're going to Yahoo Sports, you got to replace Connor and you got to replace New York Rick as well at MMA Fighting. I know they primarily worked on the show, but I know they had other roles too. So curious how that all pans out at MMA Fighting. PT Carroll's podcast will be moving over, new boxing and wrestling shows. And this is good because, you know, Ariel has, especially as we saw in the MMA Hour, doing more than just MMA. There was some boxing, there was some wrestling as well. So it's going to be like a whole new media outlet to now compete essentially with MMA Fighting, MMA Junkie, MMA, the Mac Life. So that's where it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Yeah, I'm really curious to see how this all goes and how this all sort of unfolds here. Again, this is like, you know, the fact that Ariel gets to own all of the content. Like it almost, and this kind of sets him up well too, if you think about it, like eventually Ariel's not going to be doing, you know, combat sports coverage anymore. He might want to just be a managing editor. Now he literally is that at this, you know, he just says it here. I'm the producer and director of the new site. So let's say eventually he wants to get out of MMA or wrestling or whatever. He's going to now be the owner of the site as well. So he can transition from being a reporter into like the owner of this new media entity. So it's going to be really interesting. Like I said, I have a video I'm going to come out here with soon. I just haven't had time to do it, on how the industry is changing very rapidly. I mentioned there, if you look at how, you know, people are consuming MMA content, it's certainly changing. So an interesting time that Ariel wants to get in here and basically become competition with some of these other outlets. You've also got ESPN as well. But yeah, I'm curious to see how this all works. I'm excited because again, like this is going to be another way that people are going to consume content. Again, he's talking about more shows. So you think of all the interviews, like he was doing 2 shows a week, which was already bringing out a lot of content already. Are they going to go 5 days a week? Like, really curious to see how this all sort of unfolds. And having the backing of an outlet like Yahoo Sports is certainly going to be very interesting to see how that can be leveraged, whether it's, partner. Like, a couple things I'm curious with. Number one, I'm curious to see how this does, because obviously everything Ariel's done, I mean, he is the biggest brand in the sport. It's going to be curious to see how that all goes. Number two is, like I said, the industry's changing. How will this fit into the way that people are consuming content? I'm curious about that. They've also got, like I said, boxing, wrestling. How is that going to go? They're going to be entering in new spaces there. They're going to be hiring new people as well. So, well, I'm just curious to see how this all unfolds and how it sort of, happens with the fact that it's its own thing. And how Ariel does, and how much longer Ariel's going to be doing this. Like I said, like with the fact that he's running the show, he can transition into being like a site manager as opposed to doing reporting. And are they going to be going to regular events? Are they going to be doing the run-of-the-mill stuff? I'm curious about that too. There's so many things I want to see about this. So September 13th is when things will get started, when things will take place. Will they be like a regular outlet going to every event? I don't think so. It doesn't really sound like it. It sounds like Ariel will mostly be doing shows, maybe covering the big events. Maybe they'll be doing shows at these cards. Yahoo's got a lot of money. We'll see what happens there. And the big thing I'm curious with is this going to lead to the UFC working with Ariel Helwani again? I mean, that's something I'm very curious with. It hasn't been that way for a while. Will this lead to him getting, the interviews that we know he can't get because of, like I said, certain restrictions that are going on there? So I'm also curious to see the studio. Like, that surprises me a bit because, again, if you look at how people are consuming content, and I mentioned this in the other video, like, there's not a lot of overhead for some of these content creators, but building a new studio, that seems like more traditional media to do. I don't know, I don't know what the studio is going to entail. Like, and I can't imagine real estate's cheap in New York either. So curious to see how that all kind of unfolds. And if they're going to get the returns on building the studio, that's kind of the interesting one for me. I'm surprised Ariel isn't just building something at home and then doing everything remotely. Wouldn't that be easier? But maybe they obviously they won't have guests in studio, so you can't do it from home. So that might be it too, whenever they have New York cards and stuff. But yeah, I'm kind of just taking this all in. I know this is a little bit late. I know this happened this morning at 12:26. Had some interviews, had some live streams to do, but I'm very curious because this is something we haven't seen in the MMA space. Obviously, we've seen things like Pat McAfee where he went on his own and he got a big sponsor, and it was kind of a similar thing where like he was on his own and then he now and then got so big and so great that he partnered with ESPN, and now you're seeing his programming on ESPN. This is kind of the same thing, right? Like, this is going to be part of the Yahoo family, but ultimately at the end of the day, Ariel owns everything. So that's where things will be very interesting. And Uncrowned, kind of an interesting name. So yeah, and I wonder who's going to jump ship or who's going to go over, and that's kind of some of the things I'm interested in. So I'm rambling on here, but I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. How do you think this is going to impact MMA fighting? How do you think this is going to impact the industry? Like, with the fact that we're going to have another outlet in the game that involves Ariel, you've still got MMA fighting, which is a big brand. Like, how will that go? Are they going to, bump up on Mike Heck or what? Is, MMA Junkie going to do things differently? I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see how this all unfolds. But as you know, I love covering, the side of the media in combat sports. I don't think enough people are doing it. And I'm kind of in a unique position where obviously I'm a content creator, but I'm first and foremost a reporter and journalist. And that's how I make my living. And kind of the last thing I'll say, I know I'm going to get people in the comments being like, what's the big deal? Let me ask you this. If Adam Scheffner in the NFL decided to switch networks and become a different, reporter somewhere else, or Adrian, Woj went to a different network, that's newsworthy. That's why we're talking about this, because this is a big deal. I know there's people that don't like Ariel, but to say this isn't news, you guys just aren't paying attention. This is absolutely news. And this is something that could, essentially change the industry as far as how people are going to consume content. So again, follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. Let me know your thoughts on all this. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.